Okay guys, so here we get started with trigonometry, and we're gonna do using trig to find lengths. And here we go. I'm gonna go a little bit fast, but if I go too fast, please feel free to rewind. First of all, how do we solve things? So in this case, if I have a over b equals c over d, it's called a proportion, and it's a very easy way to solving for if I have a missing one. For example, a is missing, I just look for whatever's across from it, and that's D, and that goes dividing, and the other two guys will go multiplying, B times C. If I happen to be looking for B, well, I look for what's across from it, diagonally across, and that's C, so that goes dividing, and then A times D, it's the rest. So you could do the other two for practice, and then let's look at this example. Let me just erase this point, and if I have C is what I'm looking for, diagonally across is 3, and a times 14 is what I will put on top. Plug it in your calculator, and that will give you your answer for what C is going to be equal to. So you can try this one on your own. Actually, I'll give you a hint, but this is like 10 over 1 when you don't see stuff, and then you can solve for it. Okay, so next we have Pythagorean theorem. We know that Pythagorean theorem tells us that h squared is equal to a squared plus b squared, h being the hypotenuse and a and b being the other two sides. So I'm going to show you a very cool way of proving this graphically. Let me just set this up so I can get the proper tool. So I have a triangle here which is 5 by 2. I know here this is 5 and 2. So I'm going to draw 4 triangles on this. I watched this on an Argentinian TV show once, and I'm going to do 4 triangles on this one too, which means that once I'm done drawing the triangles, the empty space should be the same. There you go. Now you're going to notice the following, that I call this A, this is A by A, so this is A squared. If I call this B, well, this is 5 by 5, so that's B squared. And if I call this C, and I don't know what C is, but it's going to be this long side right here. This is all my C's, so that's C squared. And now you can see graphically that C squared is equal to A squared plus B squared. It's kind of cool. So how do we use this? Well, we have that A squared plus B squared is equal to H squared. How do I solve for sides? Well, it's going to be fairly straightforward. And let me just change to blue. And I always have to figure out which one's my hypotenuse, because that's going to be my H squared. Equals A squared plus B squared. Then we'll replace the numbers. Now B is here, so that's B squared is equal to 3 squared plus 6 squared. And then I realize that this is 9 plus 36, and that's also B squared, and therefore B is equal to the square root of 36 plus 9 is 45. And I will plug it in the calculator and get a final answer, but I don't have a calculator with me right now. If I was solving for this, however, I would start it the same way. H squared is equal to A squared plus B squared. I realize that this is my hypotenuse, and that's the one that goes in here. I don't just always leave it like a variable, because right now I have that this is there. So A squared, we're going to say that's 2 squared, and then C squared is going to be on this side. And then we just isolate. That's 100. Take away 4, because that's the 2 squared that comes to the other side, is equal to C squared. Therefore, it's going to be square root of 96. And again, plug it in your calculator, and that's how you solve for it. Good? So for my next part, when we are talking about a right angle, there's different names for the sides, and the names always correspond to whatever angle we're talking about. Now the hypotenuse is always the hypotenuse, and that will be right across from the right angle, or the longest side. So there's no matter what, that's going to be the hypotenuse. But the opposite will depend on the angle we're talking about. So opposite, it means across. So side A is going to be the opposite over here. But on this one, which is the same triangle, because I'm talking about angle B, the opposite will be here at the bottom. If I'm talking about angle A, adjacent means it's touching. So if I put my finger on the angle A, I'll be touching the hypotenuse and the adjacent. And the adjacent in this case would be this over here, because I would be touching at the angle B and the adjacent would be right beside it. Good. Now once we have this, we can find some ratios that are called sine, cosine, and tangent. So SOHCAHTOA is for us to remember. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is adjacent over hypotenuse. And here are our formulas that you can remember very easily. I'll let you do this later on. And this is what we do in order to solve for a triangle. It's got to be a right angle triangle. So let me change colors one more time, and let's make some numbers up. Let's say this is 10, and this is 12, and I want to find out what this is. But I need to have at least one angle. Now this is a right angle triangle, and let's say that this angle is 30. So what do I want? Well, let's say I don't have this number. And if I don't have that number, now I have, in this case, I have an angle. I have the opposite. It's not writing properly. And I have the adjacent. So which formula had opposite and adjacent? It was tangent. So tan of an angle is equal to opposite over adjacent. And then I'll just put in the numbers. Tan of 30. It's not writing. Tan of 30 is equal to opposite, which was x, divided by 10. So now it's kind of like the proportion that we talked about before, right? I can pretend that this is divided by 1, and now I can isolate for my x. My x is going to be equal to, right across from the x is the 1, so I would divide by 1, and then the other two will multiply. 10 times tangent of 30. Make sure that your calculator is in degrees, and just plug that into your calculator, and you will get your answer for 10 times 30. I don't think this calculator has tangent. Let me just pull it out. No, it doesn't. So I can't show you how it's done, but you should be able to get that answer, no problem. Alright, so here we would be practicing some more, but please look at your textbook to figure out how that goes. Now, one quick word of warning. Angles of elevation and of depression are always measured with respect to the horizontal. And you'll never have trouble with angle of elevation, but usually we have trouble with angles of depression. And this is what we go. So I will give you something like this, and I said the angle of elevation is 13 degrees, and you will have no trouble saying that that's 13. But when I do something like this, like the boat ones, and I say what the angle of depression is equal to, I don't know, let's say 20 degrees, well, we have to draw the horizontal line, and that's going to be your angle of depression. People tend to put this one over here because they can see this triangle, but that's the angle of depression from over here. Okay? I know that went fairly fast. There's a couple of jokes, and actually this is a real bear that you can buy online. And here are the questions. Hope everything goes well, and I'll be answering questions on Monday. Bye.